Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Troy Campbell. Troy is a social scientist, marketing professor at the University of Oregon, a professional designer, and researcher at Netflix Insights. He's worked for Disney Imagineering, Apple, and Comic-Con, as well as the change management organization On Your Feet and the fandom company Power Level Productions. Welcome, Troy.
Woo! I am on one of my College Heroes podcasts, so this is pretty cool. Hey, Pete.
I'm very flattered. I'm happy to have you here. You're visiting Southern California.
Yes, I am. My homeland.
Troy, if you weren't working as a scientist or a designer, what would you be doing?
So I would love to be creating short form content in fiction content. So one of my dreams is to write a short story book that's just a bunch of different short stories, all that are really about something, that are quick and to the point and whimsical, and to take that on a tour and then do times where I would talk about and read the stories, but then I would also have the audience write 15-minute stories themselves, take 15 minutes and share them with each other, because I love short stories and I think everybody can be better when they're writing short stories and sharing them with each other.
So you've given this a lot of thought.
I've given that a lot of thought. Yeah.
Most people are like,
I literally have the tour planned and how it would work. And so I'm with this lady. Her name is Casey L. Wills. She is a wonderful, wonderful woman. And we fell in love writing short stories together.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So on our first date at a coffee shop, she said, let's do a free write. Because she assumed that I, as a former creative writing student, had just been doing free writes all the time. And I hadn't done one for like 5 years.
Okay.
And she's a English PhD, and so she does it all the time. And I was like, yeah, of course. I've been doing this all the time.
This is date number one.
This is, I think, date number 2, actually.
Okay.
And we wrote these stories, and lots of people do different versions of this, but with another person who you really love and who's really positive, it's just amazing. Like, we'll just write a story, and sometimes my stories will be really dark. Sometimes will be an idea for a fight scene with a superhero who has a curved projectile. And every single time, if we just take 15 minutes, we come up with a really cool story that has a bright spot that's worth conversing about. And we are not trying to write anything perfect. We're just trying to explore ideas and concepts and creativity and share with them. And it was just insane, like how quickly we fell in love doing this.
So wait, you lost me for a second. So what exactly, when you say free write, I think of like sitting down with my journal and just writing down the ideas that come to my mind.
So the idea is you write a fictional story
with the other person
by yourself.
Okay.
And the other person is doing it. And usually you start with the same prompt.
Okay.
So for instance, one of the prompts we started with one time is, are we human or are we denser? Which is a way that we both misheard the song by The Killers, Are We Human or Are We Dancer?
Okay.
And we thought it was just a beautiful start. And so we each wrote an entirely different story flowed from that.
Okay.
And sometimes we'll have ideas and we'll each write something we've been thinking about for the last couple days. And it's just great. And then
you just hand them to the other person.
We
to
hand
read?
them, or we oftentimes write so fast that we like miss words and other things. So you tell it to the other person. It's also like more, I think, emotional that way and sharing. And I do this with some of my students, in part because I don't think a lot of my students have ever spent 15 minutes really focused on being creative. And I'll have them do it, and I'll play like music at the start, and it will be, first of all, I'll do a bunch of improv games and I warm them up. And then including like stand on the table. We make a list of, if you're stuck words, that if you're ever stuck, just use that word, rocket ship. And okay, that's the next thing I'm using. We do it, and I play the music, fun music at the start, and then I slow the music down by about 8 minutes. And then the last 5 minutes is pure silence. And it's this like incredible, beautiful energy in the room. And the students come out of it. And I'm like, every single time I'm like, didn't that feel good? And like, they're just like, yeah, that was, I don't do that. And then they share with each other. They don't share in front of the class. Everybody's thing is really flawed, but the point is everybody has come up with something interesting and personal in the last 15 minutes. And some of them come up with amazing stories in 15 minutes. Other people just have a bright spot to share.
Okay, so getting back to the question, if you weren't working as a scientist or designer, you would be...
I would love to write to these short stories.
You'd be a writer.
I'd be a writer.
You'd be a writer.
Be a writer. And I don't want to write... I don't want to write probably a long novel. That's not my jam so much. I would just love to work on writing short stories, and I'd love to help people who are writing. Like, I don't want to write a Marvel movie probably, but I'd love to like help people design like moments in Marvel movies, or help use principles of psychology to use fluency and stuff. And I'd love to write like pitches for Black Mirror episodes or something like that. Yeah. So I've thought a lot about this ridiculous fantasy that will never come true.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, you never know. You're a young man.
Yes.
So I think we're just going to jump into something that I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
So you teach classes on marketing, storytelling, scientific communication, the science of cool and experiential design. You have a class called Everything Can Be Awesome.
With psychology.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but Everything Can Be Awesome is the real title.
Yeah. Everything Can Be Awesome. And this seems to be your first step towards this dream of helping people make it. So you're teaching how to make experiences better, but I can imagine this becoming a side hustle and beyond, which is not teaching how to make experiences better, but you actually help make experiences better. But let's talk about the class for a little while.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm really fascinated by this idea. So you very kindly said that I was a college hero.
Yep.
And this might be one of those, the servant becomes the master story. And this might be one, what's the, a Pygmalion story of sorts, minus the romance.
Okay.
Where I feel like I can learn from you at this moment.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So I had a conversation with basically a marketing guy turned dean. Okay. So he's moved
Why
from.
Why did he do that?
It's funny. He was kind of lamenting it. He essentially said that there's twice as much work and less than half the pay. So he feels like he's doing like 8 times the amount that he used to be doing when he worked for Disney. He's had his own shop. He's kind of bounced around a little bit, and he was sort of lamenting that. Nonetheless, one of the things that he's doing is he's taking business principles and starting to apply them to the promotion of the school that he's at. Especially with regard to storytelling.
That's awesome.
So if you think about it, you're in a business school, I'm in a business school. We're kind of behavioral scientists in this world, teaching our marketing classes, consumer behavior classes, and so on. And one of the things that I think is very striking about business schools is how little they use their own business principles that they teach.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, teaching I teach differentiation, and yet so many business schools are basically like following a Me Too strategy. They're basically like doing exactly the same thing that everybody else is doing, and just trying to optimize the same things.
Yeah, it's hilarious, right? If you want to have some fun, listeners out there, go to any business school that is not one of the top 20, but not lower than, let's say, 250. And just put your screen on black and white so you can't see the colors, and they all look the exact same way. You're going to find your destiny. You're going to get job ready, and you're going to care about the environment while you do it.
Yes. So they do a very poor job communicating their value.
Yes.
Right. And especially they do a poor job getting the students excited about being students.
Oh, yes. I absolutely hate how much universities play up every single thing but being a student.
Yes.
It's awful.
Then the next thing that they don't do well is that they don't actually create a highly differentiated product. right? So that is that, like, if you step into a class, again, among most of the schools, even the top 20, they all feel, look, and sort of seem the same. Some schools have a bit more leeway, flexibility to offer kind of cool, niche, interesting classes. And it's usually the best schools that can do that the most, which is ironic because they need to do it the least because they have such demand for the brands anyways. So this is a very long lead up to how you're going to help me.
Yeah. Okay.
So I teach, my go-to class at this stage in my career, and probably will be for a long time, I think, is I teach the core marketing management course, typically to daytime MBAs, but it's not limited to that. I've taught evening MBAs. I've taught at other universities, whether it be their executive MBA programs, their flex programs or whatever. And the reason is this is a kind of turnkey class. It's essentially the same class in terms of content in every place.
Yeah.
Now, I've worked hard to make it an appealing class because it's one of those classes no one wants to teach it and no one wants to take it. And so no one wants to teach it and take it for the same reasons. So that is that if you know marketing, you resent having to take the class.
Yeah.
Because it's just review. It's a sort of core required course. And those people who don't know marketing, they want to have their concentration in finance or accounting or OB or organizational behavior or something like that. They're like, I don't want to take this class. I want to take finance, accounting, organizational behavior. And so you have to teach this class down the middle. So it's underwhelming to the marketing focused folks. And then it's a little bit of a stretch for the people who aren't. And it's a little bit more work than they would like to do. And so, you kind of make the best of it. Right. And so as a faculty member, no one wants to teach that class.
Yeah.
Right. They want to teach a more specialized class where the students opt in, and so on. So I've worked to make the class not only valuable, but to create enthusiasm in the class. And some of that is kind of traditional song and dance. I mean, not literally, but, I bring a lot of effort to the performance aspect of the class.
And there's very few professors who can bring as good of stories as you can, right?
That's very nice. Yeah. So I, and that, look, that gets you pretty far.
Yes.
Right. It gets you really pretty far. And then I've done other, I think, and I would not say any of these things is innovative per se, but, I've introduced a hackathon into the class and I've had students marvel at this experience, essentially saying to me, when I signed up for business school, that's what I thought class was going to be like. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you could bring in guest speakers and I don't do that anymore. I bring in a panel, and then I have little things along the way, exercises and fun stuff to do.
Yeah. By the way, as a thing, I think guest speakers are the stupidest thing you can possibly bring into a class because every single guest speaker you bring into a class, if they're that famous, they have a better, more polished thing that they said on YouTube or a podcast.
Yes.
Right. So I never have guest speakers anymore. And the way that I do guest speakers in my class is I find my friends, and I'm going to make you do this. And I have them record 5 minutes where they say one thing. And they also reference me and tie in. It's called Hello Troy's class. And they watch that ahead of time. So I have like 20 guest speakers in like 5-minute segments for my class. And the students really like that. And they're like, oh my God, this famous person-ish person did something for Troy, and that means they also did it for us, and it's good, and I like that a lot. But yeah, interactive is the way to do it. And so don't bring if the person's going to do a guest talk, don't have them talk for more than 10 minutes. We do this with at the university, like with the undergraduates, where the undergraduates' worlds are really small. We joke that it starts at Taylor's and it ends 2 blocks down at Webfoot, which are the 2 bars. And their view of the world's very small. So one of the ways that we have them most strongly interact with them is they all really know the University of Oregon. So if you're teaching them principles and you talk about the marketing of the University of Oregon, they just have enough concrete information to engage with it all. And so we bring in somebody from the University of Oregon who works on the marketing there and talks for 10 minutes, and then the kids go at it with them. That's great. And so I really like that.
So so the one last thing about the panel is I do 12-minute talks. So they do 4 12-minute talks.
That's awesome.
Then we get a break, and then we do a town hall style.
Ooh, that's really
Q&A.
Cool. That's really cool.
And then here's the tip. I actually have the students submit the questions beforehand.
Oh, so organized.
And then I vet them and I choose what questions get asked. And so what happens is these panelists at the end of it, they go, those were great questions.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you know why? Because I got 50 of them and I picked the 9 best.
Yeah.
Right. So there's never like a dumbass question.
Yep.
That wastes 5 minutes of precious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So help me make my class better.
I'll help you make your class better.
So like, what are some, okay, hold on. I'm going to set this up a little bit even more because in your class, everything can be awesome. You do activities.
Yeah.
And you can find these on your website, which I'll list. You do love poem, what's in the bag, editor's edge, ideas on the floor. Yep. So they all have fun names and they're all designed to enhance and develop creativity and to, I assume, hammer home some learning point.
Yeah. So what I've always found is one of the problems we have in every class is what you pointed out. There are students at many different levels, right? So students at every different level like concrete things. So they like you telling a personal story, but the other concrete thing they like is they like applying the ideas, right? And so if you give somebody an activity to apply the ideas, no matter what level they're at, unless it's like impossible to apply the ideas, like sometimes that could get in like math or statistics or something like that. But in my stuff, that's not most complicated thing is break-even analysis in the math. And so if I give them an activity where they apply a concept, that changes everything, right? So if I teach them something and then they're making a slogan, for instance, that's just like the simplest example, right? I tell them the research on how when you're younger, you're more interested in extraordinary things. And as you're older, you value the more ordinary. And then they make a slogan right there in the class for the same product for 2 different audiences, right? And the people who've had a lot of marketing background, they write way better slogans, but they're all equally engaged, right? And that's like the most basic example. We do lots and lots of more complicated ones. So I really like what are more or less setting up Mad Libs or story forms. So that's where I will set up part of it, right? So I'll give them a story that has 3 parts.
Okay.
So I'll give them like, you need to write a story that follows Disney destiny. The person always has this thing inside of them. They struggle to figure it out. They have a discovery point, right? Or I'll give them a logic statement where it's, if this, then we'll do this. Or I'll set up a thing where I'm doing the science of cool, where I'll take a song that's really cool and I'll just take out most of the lyrics, but it still has the structure of autonomously breaking the norm, which is Caleb Warren's definition of cool. And then they fill in the song in all the different genres, right?
I see.
And so what I've done is I've given them a concept and I've given them a structure that everybody in the class can immediately create something in 5 minutes. And lots of people might say that that's really constricting. It is a little bit constricting, but it's constrained creativity. And like, I'll give them, in my most iconic class I do is the science of cool, more or less. I teach.
Did you just call your class iconic?
Yes. At the University of Oregon,
it's iconic.
Troy's cool class is iconic because he's going to drop a bunch of bars in that class, and you're all going to be amazed at if you just understand that being cool isn't saying you're the best. Being cool is resisting the rest, right? And it changes everything. And you can just like look at an Eminem song that's not as good and look at an Eminem song that is good. When he's just bragging, he's not as good. It's not as cool as when he's resisting the norm.
Yeah.
And you can do this with everything, and you can explain it. You know, Freddie Mercury is breaking free. Travis Scott the shit is way too formal and I'm not following suit. And also High School Musical is breaking free. And for all of those audience, it's the same thing. And then I take High School Musical lyrics and put them in a Travis Scott song. And they're like, it's like, I forgot exactly how it goes, but it's something like this. It's like, oh, baller gonna teach. Yeah, it's me, the God who they talk about when they preach, teaching you to keep it hip from the city to the beach. There's not a star in heaven that we cannot reach, which is a line from High School Musical. Okay. And it fits right in there.
I see.
Right. And so By the way, people listening, that is not my best game. But what it happens in that class is everybody's making things, and if I give them a story form, even though my story form only like has room for sometimes like 10 words or less, they're adding lines to the strong. They're adding details to their story immediately because the story form starts them, and they just get really creative.
Yeah, that's great.
So I really like story forms. The other thing that I like doing.
Wait. Let's stop. I'm going to stop you because you're teaching me. Okay. So now we need to discuss this idea about story form. So I do a couple things. So of course, as I'm listening to you, I'm getting anxious. And the reason I'm getting anxious is because I've worked really hard to get this class to where it is. And it's really good. So then
change it?
Well, so the issue is, but to make it great, so what I'm thinking is like, oh shit, this is a lot of work. I've got a lot of balls in the air, but I'm committed to making the class better.
Yeah.
So for example, I do two things in the class. And of course, these MBAs are competitive. So I do something called the positioning challenge and the promotion challenge. So they happen at two different points. And it's sort of a little bit of a competition where the groups, so I show the students a series of marketing communications for a product, and then they have to write the positioning statement for the product. So for the listener who doesn't know what a positioning statement is, it's an internal document that an organization uses. It's a very brief summary of what the product is, who the competitors are, what its point of difference, and what is reason to believe. And you use that to help you make strategic and tactical decisions with regard to your offering.
Yeah, and if you've ever looked at a company that seems to not make sense, it's because they don't understand their own positioning.
They probably haven't done this.
Yeah, they haven't. They
probably haven't done this. Now, a good marketing communication, a good ad, television, print, radio, or whatever, will either cover all of the elements of a positioning statement or part of the elements. Right? You know what I mean? So if it's done well, the positioning statement then becomes a creative brief, serves as a foundation for a creative brief that you hand over to an advertising agency, and then they make this stuff for you. Kind of thing. So what I have the students do is back the positioning statement out of for the positioning challenge, and then I have all the students go up on the board and write the positioning statements that they've come up with.
Yeah,
and then we discuss it, kind of thing. It's a big win. You know what I mean? It's applying an idea that feels abstract and easy until you have to do it.
Yeah.
Right, that kind of thing.
I love teaching students. They don't know as much as they think they know. I do this thing where I give them a term. And my class is based upon, a lot of it is just define, apply. I give you a concept and you have to explain in a way that you'd operationalize that content, whether it's the IKEA effect, whether it's loss aversion, whether it's identity marketing, whether it's side identity. And the students, it's so hard for them because they can come up with good ideas, but they don't always, the idea might not be the principle that they gave. And it really shows them how much structure they actually don't have in their thought process and helps them get it. Sorry, I got off.
No, that's great. Yeah. Also, because, boy, we must be losing listeners left and right at this point because we're just getting into the weeds about this. I think the issue is, universities are very good at teaching concepts and having students regurgitate those concepts.
Yes.
And the world is really good at rewarding people's ability to apply the knowledge that they have. And so we're doing them a disservice if we don't have them working through application.
So we have a bunch of board members at the University of Oregon who more or less say this about students. They say, whenever I go to businesses, this is what I hear about students. They know a lot. They're woke AF, they're good people, but they do not know how to apply and communicate what they know.
Yes.
And it's just a huge problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so how should I be thinking about applying this sort of storytelling, short form storytelling? Is there a connection? You know what the core marketing management course is like. And so how do I use what you do in some way in my class?
Yeah. So how do you get
or should I?
How do you get a story form into most every class? That's sort of what I try and do.
Yeah. I guess the question is this a technique that I can start to use to kind of get students to reflect on what I've been teaching them, what they've been reading. I also, by the way, my syllabus has videos and podcasts in addition to traditional Harvard Business Review, Harvard Business School readings and so on, because why not?
So my class uses a lot more techniques than just story forms. So I'm always picking the thing that, so I just said I try to put a story form in every class, but I really mean is I try to get a story form or a large experience in class, and or I do something that I call fire lecture, because I have to put a name on everything. And so let me explain fire lecture, because when you can't put in a really great activity, it actually works, I think, really well. Okay. Here's how fire lecture works. So we know that there are certain times the best way to do a lecture is to give a long lecture and then have the students do an activity at the end. Yes. Maybe you do 80-minute lecture, 10-minute activity, or maybe it's 30-minute lecture, 60-minute activity, whatever it is. The other version of lecture that we know about is the minis, right? So we have 15 minutes, then we ask the students to think about something, they discuss in their group, and then they share it with the class. And so you do 15 minutes, students discuss, students organize what they did, students present their ideas, 15 minutes, students discuss, organize, present. Okay. And the problem is the discuss, organize, and present takes a heck of a long time. Yes. And you actually lose any sense of flow in the class. Okay. And so what I like to do as much as I can is to structure it so that the students think of things, they organize things, and they present things. And I mix those up with my lecture. Okay. So for instance, I'll have, one of the ways that you can do that is to do a really strong ready set, which is you have the students come in and you give them some questions and they prepare things, right? So they find examples that they need to do. You give them one of the terms and they apply that idea. One that if they just read the definition, they can come up with a good thing. And so you've already set them up with some stuff. Okay. And then at any moment that I need, I can call and draw on examples that the students have already done, and then we can discuss it a little bit. Or I'll teach an idea and then they will come up with okay, what's an example of a problem based upon what Troy just said? Okay. And then they'll write that and they'll figure it out. Then I'll explain how to solve the solution to it. Mm-hmm. And then they'll do that. Then I'll do a little bit of a story or some extra thing that's cute that maybe they'll edit after I say that, or maybe they'll just listen to it and it'll provide context for the next thing they'll say, and then they present. I see. And so what it does is when I get the class right, sometimes I can actually get it where I can go 5 to 10 minutes just over and over and over through this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just this wonderful thing. One other way I do, it's sort of a story form class. But I teach them the science of love and sex one day, and in doing it, they design a date for a couple. And so the idea is that this couple's going to go to different places, and every location, like whether it's a restaurant, a theme park, an arcade, a park, that park needs to have an element that allows the principle to happen, right? Like the Capilano Bridge principle, when you're excited, you fall in love more with people, or the love languages or something. And so I teach the concept, and then they write an idea for the date down on the board, and then they're up there and I can say a couple of them or not. And then at the very end, after we've gone through it, they refine that idea. And so it's this constant creativity, me making sure that I recognize at least every group every 20 minutes for something that they've done. Yeah. And it's just this, and it's not really that hard.
Yeah. So, okay. So what's immediately coming to mind, and I can imagine if there's a teacher listening to this saying, that's great, but my class is packed with content. All of it's important. Yeah. I can't fit this in.
Yeah. So what I would say, the first thing I would say is your students aren't going to remember most of the content. So that's what I say too. From an educational standpoint, yeah. The other thing is what I do a lot with my stuff is I take anything that's boring and I just make it reading. Right. So most of the things anything that I'm going to lecture on that is essential to that class, right, is in the textbook, or I can find an open source educational resource that has it, especially in like a marketing management course, right? Yeah. There's nothing that I'm going to say that I can't give them something to read.
Yeah, I use a video to teach them break-even analysis.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to do that in class.
No.
And I might have them come in after they've applied break-even analysis and we'll do the game, but I'm not going to waste the boring lecture time on that.
Yes.
And there are some classes where that is, I can understand where you're like, well, no one reads. And I'm like, well, then who cares? Your students deserve to fail. I don't know. There's some situations where that would not be appropriate, right? There's some situations, I teach at a very privileged school or quite a privileged school. In certain situations where we know that like people don't have as much time outside of class, that would not be correct potentially to do. But in my privileged situation with my awesome business students, I can do it. Yeah. So that's just my general idea is if it's boring to teach, just move it to reading
or some sort of course resource.
Yeah.
That's consumed.
Yep.
Yeah, I see. And then, because I'm really coming around to this idea. First of all, I agree with you that students don't remember most of what you want them to remember. Mm-hmm. The good news is they can always look it up. It's easier than ever to look things up. I feel like my primary job is to build enthusiasm for the topic.
Yep.
To teach them the language associated with the topic, and to get them to think. Yeah. As I like to say, think like a marketer, and not the evil marketer that they have in their head when they come into the class, but the marketer who truly is creating value in a world and making the world faster, more convenient, safer, cheaper, whatever that thing, more exciting is connecting to these sort of major ideas.
And I think I'm going to toot our horn a little bit here. God, people don't say that anymore. So I'm going to exaggerate, but I also believe this exaggeration, which is that marketing and psychology, and I say this in the first day of class, is the most widely applicable and useful type of knowledge you will ever learn. And no, in this class, I don't think this class is the most important class that you guys will ever take. Hopefully you've already taken that and you now know what you want to do. But the class that I'm teaching you today is the most important class to help you with the most important class and topic you're going to go into. Because what is more important in the world than understanding how you and other people think and behave? It means it's everything. It's art, it's business, it's your relationship. And I point out on the first day, I'm going to teach you how to get people to what makes people spend money. But I'm also going to tell you what makes people happy. And so you can use that in a business situation, but you can also now know how you can save money more and how you can make your significant other more happy. This is awesome. Guys, this is going to be so much fun. And like the students say at the end of the day, like one of the things I do in the class is I have them apply the concepts to every homework. They have to apply it to a business, but then they have to apply it somewhere in their own life. So persuasion, how would you persuade a relative who disagrees with you on something? An experience, how would you use this on a date or when throwing a party? And my students give me far too many examples for parties.
I used to do that for my consumer behavior course. So I used to say, listen, only a fraction of you will end up in marketing, but all of you are consumers. And so I'm going to teach this class with those two prongs.
Yeah, it's lovely.
With the marketing management course, I don't do that I'm not as explicit about that. I sort of slow play the personal stuff a little bit more. But on day one, it's interesting, like, I don't know, for anybody who's taught a class sort of knows what happens is you're like, shit, I got to teach this class. And it's this huge daunting thing to build a class. So what do? You get 1 to 3 people's materials and then you cobble together a class. And initially it seems, like a cobbled together class from these other folks. And then with time, you kind of hone the class. You kind of make it more yours. You cut and add and revise and figure out a style. That's if you're dedicated to it. Most people just keep teaching the cobbled together class their whole career.
Yeah.
And
in part because there's no incentive for them to do any different because of how universities reward people to some degree.
To some degree. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Anybody who's research focused like we are. Yeah. So, I remember I used to teach Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I would talk about how needs are the foundation for creating value, right? So if you can understand what are the problems that people have, You can think creatively about different ways to solve those problems, and you can build a business on those solutions. And then I was like, God, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is such a shit model of needs.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Now it's easy to teach. It's familiar.
So easy to teach.
Those kinds of things.
Students love the shape.
Students love it. It's linear, the whole thing. And yet it goes against everything that I know about what motivates people and about well-being.
Yep.
Not everything, but a lot against it. So then I was like, I'm going to teach Maslow, and then I'm going to introduce the PERMA model, Martin Seligman's model of well-being, which is my go-to model of well-being. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to understand how people are trying to live a good life, you have to understand the paths to living a good life. And here are the paths. And the model's far superior way to think about this stuff, right? It's not linear. The paths change due to life circumstance, due to development, et cetera. It's more complex, but it's much richer. And it's also more applicable. So you can actually use it in your own life, in a sense. And then I was like, why am I teaching Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Right? Like, so I just cut that out.
Yep.
Right. And so now I just teach the PERMA model kind of thing. And I do this, again, under the auspice of you need to understand this, because if you're going to create value, this is how you do it. But then I get to tag the lesson and just go, hey, folks, maybe you're not a freak for wanting to live a different life than the person next to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there are multiple, in the same way that the world, there's this word in marketing called heterogeneity, right? Just variance.
I pepper that into conversation all the time to sound smart.
Variance in people's needs, wants, preferences, tastes, etc. Kind of thing. It's like, it's the closest we get to being a snowflake, our uniqueness.
Yeah.
And yet, you know what I mean? Like, there's this sort of tendency to think about this kind of homogenous path to living a good life.
Yeah. So it's actually a super problem in business school, especially if you're marketing majors, because we're mad stereotypes here. Sorry for this, but the business stereotype of somebody in business is somebody who's more going to get a job in accounting or financing, right? The way people dress, the way people talk, the way people think about it. And marketers, if you're dressing and talking and thinking like somebody who's going to get in accounting or finance, sometimes that's wrong. And I talk to my students about, if you show up to your interview in a frumpy suit, that's going to work for this person, but it's not going to work for this person. And you have to think about all these different things and stuff. And my students, just what you said is it's okay to go a different path and live a different path. And I'm just when I say these things, the first time I just made them as offhanded comments, because I'm just quoting Disney movies more or less, but it really resonates with the kids, right? They come up to me after class when I just talk about taking multiple paths and, and being yourself, but understanding that there are different ways to be happy, and it works differently for different people. Success means very different things. We talk about the different types of goods, right? Good art, good as an art, good as success, good for the world. And they're just, brains are pleasantly blown and comforted at the same time by it.
I agree. Marketing is interesting because it does have this sort of 1-2 punch where it's increasingly quantitative. And so it behooves you to have good mathematical skills these days, statistical skills, programming skills, and so on. And yet it still is a problem-solving creative pursuit. And I think one thing that is helping a lot is this sort of rise of the nerd founder who may have the sort of traditional kind of programming thing, but they're essentially marketers. Yeah. The Bezoses of the world and the Elon and so on. Yeah. Like, these folks are these rock stars, it's these new billionaire rock stars they're not the Warren Buffett types. No. They're making stuff. And what they're often doing is making stuff that has a very strong, their organizations have a very strong marketing focus. Yeah. And so there's sort of a coolness.
They understand feelings.
Yeah.
Even if you argue that sometimes they're really abusing that understanding, they really, really do understand it's about feelings and emotion, and it's not how fast it gets to you. It's how you feel about how fast it gets there. It's not that this is a eco-friendly car. It's that it's the motherfucking sexiest eco-friendly car.
Yeah, I love that. I tell that story about, the associations that people have with cars that are good for the environment. Mm-hmm. That is that they're slow and they're drab and they're uncool but good. Yeah. And then Elon comes along and go, why does that have to be a negative correlation? Yeah. Why can't it be good for the environment and badass? Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. So another great thing about being a marketing professor right now is Bobby Jones has a book called Good is the New Cool. And it's the idea that, at least for the moment, the appearance of doing good for the world is the new cool, because cool is always just a resistance to the norm that came before it. Mm-hmm. And the norm in business a while ago was not doing good things.
Yes. And so, not that long ago.
Yeah, not that long ago. And so this just really cool thing which is if you want to succeed in marketing, have a video about transgender rights. Like, and that works for companies right now. And it's just a really, really cool time. Now, obviously, companies abuse that. They don't do it right. They don't really understand the populations they're trying to serve and all that. But it's more fun and better to teach now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, right. Like, so the obvious misstep was the Kyle Jenner Pepsi commercial.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that Pepsi can help smooth race relations and end police violence. But the point I think that you're making is, so Pepsi did that badly, but at least Pepsi was trying to do it.
Yeah.
And so versus this very vapid, positioning that they had before. Yeah. All right. I want to give some background because people don't know this, but you and I have known each other for a long time.
Indeed.
When was it that we met?
A decade.
It's
I'm
been
32.
10 years.
I heard about you when I was 22.
Okay.
Well, a little bit before I was 22. Yeah.
All right. That's funny to me. So we actually met when you were applying to graduate programs.
Yep.
And so
I'll tell the short story really quickly.
Please.
Because it's a way you can't tell it because you'll just sound cocky. So I really, really wanted to work with Pete. But I also really, really wanted to work with Dan Ariely at Duke University, and
a previous podcast guest.
Yeah. So it came down. So for those people who have never accepted to graduate school, you have to make a decision by a certain time. It's like 5 p.m. on a Wednesday or something.
It's like April 20th or something like that.
And so I literally went down to the last 45 minutes, and I literally threw darts at a board.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I threw darts at a board, and eventually I decided to go to Duke, which I think, because what everybody says when you're picking a university is go to the university where there are multiple faculty that really feel right for you. And why I liked a lot of people at Colorado, like I really like John Lynch, the research wasn't a good fit for me.
Yes.
And you need to have lots of people who are a good fit, because I went to Duke University and I thought I wanted to work with this guy named Gavin Fitzsimmons who did unconscious stuff. Just by the end of the second year, I was like, I love you, Gavin. You're so cool. But I do not like doing this type of research.
Right.
It is like, fine, here's a Diet Coke. Let's talk about sports. It's awesome. And yeah, so I was really into that. And one of the things that I loved both about you and about Dan is when I was interviewing at your schools, you both were about being really good researchers, but having these very interesting life. And you said this to me, and I have repeated this many, many times. How do I make decisions? One of the values that I think about is, will this make my life more interesting? Mm-hmm. And I think that if that was the only thing you had, it obviously would mess things up, but it's a very, very good thing to be thinking about all the time. And, does this make my life more interesting? And I've thought about that all the time. And also when I'm in a situation that's not so good, but I'm like, this is going to be a good story. I'm learning something. I'm living by Pete's principle.
Yes, living an interesting life.
Yeah.
So I'm super flattered. I actually think you made the right choice also. And I can say that. I mean, I was disappointed, obviously, but I understand it. Like, these are, obviously it's hard to predict the future, but, choosing a place like Duke that has resources, and then Dan is a rock star. Yeah. I mean, but as an aside, part of the reason that the humor research has become so prominent in my life is because of Dan Ariely. And the thinking goes something like this. I always teach differentiation in my course. It's a fundamental idea is that you need to provide value, but you need to provide value distinct from the value that your competitors are providing. Otherwise, you just have to price it lower. Okay. So you just offer it cheaper and it's a race to the bottom. So at the time when I was starting to think about doing more publicly facing stuff, Dan and I were doing very similar kinds of research.
Yep.
I was focusing on moral psychology, I was doing emotions and decision making. We're kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of our training and perspective and so on. Dan's way smarter than I am, but that's there. And so and at this point, Dan had already had a best-selling book. Maybe he was
Upside at the time.
He might have been. He has his second.
Was coming out at that time.
That's right. And so I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to do more outward-facing work, what do I do it on? And then I'm like, well, here's Dan Ariely essentially doing what I do, and he's leaps and bounds. He's so far ahead of me. I can't out Dan Ariely. I just knew I couldn't do it. Not only did he have the head start, but he also has the acumen, and he has, Dan, he's a freak of nature.
He's a freak of nature.
He's a freak of nature, both intellectually, his motor,
his personality. He has this understanding, like he'll go in a room and he'll just tell a 5-minute joke to start like something, and it just works because he's just amazing. He's great. He's also great at using other people, and I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, he's a good manager.
Yes. So yeah.
So I was like, can't do it. Not going to try.
Nope.
And so I was like, well, this humor stuff though. And so I chose to go out into the world with the humor stuff way early.
Yeah.
Right. So what most people do is they when they write something, they're writing it after 10 years of experience. The humor code, we started writing it maybe 2 years after I started studying what I'm studying. And that's why the book's written as it is, as an exploration, as a journey of discovery. It was not written as an opus, in any way. And so I, while flattered that it went down the last minute, I think you made the right choice.
Yeah. I remember, so you're not going to remember this, but you actually said almost what you just said exactly, where you said, I'm going to be some version of a poor man's Dan Ariely. And you said it in this car at night, and you hadn't parked well, and you joked that I wasn't going to come because you didn't park well. and I was just like, and you were being like really like emotional, like not emotional, but you're like sharing like a very personal, I'm making this decision.
Yeah.
And I'm this like 22-year-old kid being like, oh my God, Pete's like my friend. This is cool. We're getting brunch tomorrow too.
That's funny. Well, you were a delight, and it's really amazing to sit here and to be trying to squeeze knowledge from you.
Dope.
Now, I like when I have firsts on the podcast. I'm a big fan of firsts.
Okay.
So, we have a first with you.
Okay.
You were like, I've got some ideas of some things that we should talk about.
Yeah.
And I said, don't tell them to me. And so, first of all, no one has ever done that before. We're 70 plus.
So no one's brought in notes.
No one's brought in notes like this. Now, I have had people ask me questions. And I always find that to be kind of amusing. But, what's interesting is it's usually the most accomplished people. Right, so the most accomplished people they're not interested in what they have to say. They want to mine this experience for something that benefits them. It's part of the reason why they're really accomplished.
Yep.
Because they don't care about, like, their egos they can set aside in many ways. And so I've been fussing around with the question. I really haven't ever gotten to it. And to be honest, I think I might have asked it once, and the person kind of was like,
I'm nervous.
And the question is, what do you want to talk about? And so given that you're prepared.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do one of these two things. So we actually got to talk about one of the things that I'm most passionate about, but I'll just tag it one more time and we'll see if we get to the other ones, which is I really think that we should spend time making things and doing art.
Oh my God. So yes, thank you for saying that.
And whatever that means, like my art is existential short stories about aliens comparing themselves to humans, but maybe your art is like my dad, which is like really narrative, interesting versions of dodgeball that he did for his Boys and Girls Club kids. And he invented also this free-for-all version of dodgeball. Like, just make stuff. I'm not good at painting, but I paint every couple months just because it's fun and just to make stuff. And when other people see it and you express parts of your soul and you share it, just make stuff.
So this has come up, and this is something that I've come up on the podcast before, and this is something that I've talked about and I'm fussing around with writing about. I don't know where it's going to go yet. It's probably going to end up in my secret project.
Ooh.
But I think that the average person, I think about it in terms of ratios. So you say make stuff.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'll tell you where the first place that it has come up. Oh, that is with the secret project, but I'll talk about it anyways. Is so Cal Newport has a book about digital minimalism. Cal Newport is he's written some very good books about kind of career development, learning how to make things, kind of thing. So he has a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Uh-huh.
He has another book called Deep Work. And these are books for creative types, people who are making stuff for a living. And then his follow-up book is something, I don't know if it's called digital minimalism, but that's what it's about. It's basically like throw your smartphone in the ocean. And he has this thing about every week, he's like, make or repair something, make or fix something.
That's a nice principle. And
the idea is that when you're making something or you're fixing something, it's very hard to be on your phone. It takes concentration, takes effort. And Cal's orientation is that of craftsperson.
Yeah.
Right. So if it was up to him, he would bring back the craftsperson mentality and put it into the white collar world.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about it, right? Like a blacksmith. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think the average person sees a blacksmith or imagines the oldie times blacksmith and being like, boy, that work's drudgery, kind of a thing. Just sitting there all day, banging on stuff, working, the hot fire and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't disagree more.
Yep.
I actually think a blacksmith is a great livelihood. Right. And the reason is, one is like, you are up, you're not seated. You're moving around, and you're really more of an artist than you are a person who is swinging a hammer, because every hammer swing with a blacksmith matters.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're making something.
Yeah.
There's
an involvement.
And it has this ability to create a flow state where time melts away, where you become so focused and mindful of what you're doing that you reach this, it's not pleasurable, but it's this good feeling. And so it's a path to living a good life. So I think the average person probably has, I think about this in terms of ratios. So you do say make stuff. What I want to do is I want to change your ratio of consuming to creating.
That's really cool.
Okay. So I think the average person's ratio of consuming to creating is like 10-1.
Yep.
Let's say.
Uh-huh.
And I might be generous when I say that. And why is it 10-1? Well, because our educational system makes you think creating stuff is unpleasant. Right?
Creating stuff in art is like reserved for the special people and or exist only to make money.
Okay. Yes, right. And consuming stuff is easy. So creating is hard and consuming is easy,
Make
right?
the money to watch the thing on the biggest TV, pay for the XD version of Netflix.
Yes. And so we walk around with these consumption machines in our pocket, where we never need to be bored. And by the way, the quality of the consumption is out of this world. There's something for everyone. It's limitless. You never run out. Mm-hmm. It's just completely fantastic. And so it's just easier. And it's pleasurable, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the issue is creating stuff is difficult and it's not pleasurable. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that it can become easier, never becomes easy, never becomes easy. It can become easier and it never becomes pleasurable, but it can become good.
Yeah.
It creates goodness, all right, in our lives. So what I want people to consider doing is, can you flip the ratio from 10 to 1 to 1 to 3? So for every hour that you spend consuming, you spend 3 hours creating. I don't think we should ever stop consuming. Right? I think that if you want to be a great writer, you need to read great writing.
Yeah.
If you want to become a great director, you need to watch good and bad movies.
Yeah.
If you want to become an artist, you need to go to museums. Whatever that might. If you want to be a singer, you need to listen to music and so on. So it's like the consuming is the nutrition and the creation is the fitness. You know what I mean? And so the nutrition fuels the fitness.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of thing. And so now, of course, this is easy to say. It's hard to do because what you need to do is commit yourself
to create.
Because here's the thing, you say, okay, I'm going to start creating stuff. So you're like, on Saturday, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to start to write, or I'm going to start to paint, or I'm going to start to whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time to start to see the benefits of the creating. Because at first, it's just going to be agonizing and ugly, painful.
Yeah.
But eventually, it can start to become the thing that you're compelled to do.
Yeah.
As a result.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think there's also like little ways you can get into start creating. I think cooking is a really good concept of creating.
I
right?
agree.
And so, I think one of the coolest things about you and my life is that we know so many cool, smart people. And so like, and we all know somebody like this, probably just a great cook in our life. And like you said, whenever I'm hanging out with him, I don't want to tell him anything about psychology. I just want to know, how do you properly sear that meat like you did last night, right? And I learn a little bit from him, and then I try it, and it's not the best thing the first time, but it's still good. And then once I get it good, then I add something complicated, and now I have my own version of it. And I told him about it, and he's like, "Oh, I never thought of that." And I know lots of people do this, but try it, people. You sear it on your pan. So steak or whatever food you're making, then you put it in the oven, right? This is the classic technique. But what I like to do is then I like to take it out and I like to slice the steak or the meat. And then I like to just do it a little bit more on the pan, and it kind of re-sears it, and it's real good. If you like your stuff rare, it's not good. But if you like anything of medium to well, so good. Do it, people.
So I think the point is to bring up cooking as a possibility is these are, to me, the domain is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it's music or writing or cooking or improv or I just don't even care what the thing is. I just think that our lives become much richer. Also, I think the world becomes a better place. And also, you become a more interesting person.
Yep.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you find your relationships underwhelming, if you find your dating life to be poor, this is probably a reason for it. It's because you have nothing new to bring. You're not an interest. People who consume all the time forego the ability to be interesting. And so it has this secondary unanticipated benefit of like giving you something that other people don't have.
Yeah. Like what I always say about rich people some of the time, it's like the most boring people with the coolest shoes, this brain they never even seem to have used, right? Like, and I see so many people like that all the time. And people just like, they're like, I'm cool because I'm wearing this shoe. I'm like, but that shoe technically is about this concept and this breaking the norm or this athleticism or this artistic thing. And you have none of those qualities. So you're a poser and you should take off those shoes and give them to me. Yeah.
Well, so my experience with this was always, so I did a workout earlier today. I was doing this ladder drill and I was doing these shuffle drills. So you can imagine, like, I'm not a young man. I'm doing these kind of high school football, basketball, lacrosse style drills. Kind of thing. That. And this guy is in the gym and he can't help it. He's like, you a baller? You play basketball? I swear to God, he says this to me. And I was like, not anymore. but I used to play basketball kind of thing. And he just was enjoying the fact, watching me do this thing. I'm not saying I was doing it well by any means. So when I used to play basketball, you used to pick teams. Sometimes it depends on the way it worked. Was sometimes guys would shoot, the first two guys to shoot, they were the captains of each team, and then they would pick from the folks, that are waiting. Or the other one is you call next and you put together a team and then you go out. And by the way, it's winner take all, right? So the winner stays. And so you're eager to win, especially when you're young and you can play for 2.5 hours. You don't want to sit and wait, kind of thing. And so the key was always figuring out the guys who were good from the guys who look good.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So the guys who have all the gear and have all the look, all, as I like to say, all sizzle, no steak.
Yep.
Right. Versus the guy whose, shorts were a little too short, you know what I mean? And maybe he's a little too old. Maybe he wasn't quite as athletic as some of the other guys. But you put that guy on the team.
Yeah.
And he can knock down open shots. He never takes a bad one. He moves the ball. He gets back on defense. You win with a bunch of guys like that, kind of a thing. And so I think this is sort of like the real cool people in the world don't always look cool.
Yeah.
Right. But they're doing the cool things.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So,
yes.
So we had that tag. What
other things?
What's the other thing? What do you want to talk about?
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is that I think we all have, so these two things, I'm unsure whether it's best described as all the experiences. My lady and my friend, we do lots of different things and we always joke all the experiences, or the fact that we have many selves. And I think that there's a couple things.
Okay, hold on. I understand the idea of having many selves. What do you mean by having all the experiences? So
it's just the idea is doing lots and lots of different things that potentially are almost contradictory, right? So for instance, we like really fancy food, but we also like really cheap, messy food, right? So sometimes we are going to the really fancy French place and joie de vivre, totally expensive style. And also lots of times we go to Sonic and get their Oreo ice cream, right?
I see.
And I think that we need to have lots of experiences, and I'll get to that. But I'd also start with the thing is with my students, and I see this in the whole world, is all they are trying to do is find who they are, as if who they are is one thing.
I see.
Right? And I don't think that's the correct way. I think it's true with most people, when they look at I think when you look at the Avengers and people are like, who are you on the Avengers? I'm like, I'm kind of Tony. I'm kind of Steve. I'm kind of Hawkeye sometimes. Hey, I'm nerdy and I'm the Hulk sometimes as well. Yes. And I think we have all these different pieces of ourselves, and we don't create worlds where we allow ourselves to accept ourselves as all these different versions of ourselves and experience those things. And on top of that, I think it's just really taxing to young people who are trying to find themselves, when in actuality, there are lots of different people or can experience lots of different things.
I agree.
Yes. And so maybe it's not the most interesting thing in the world, but the idea is, how do you create the space for you to have experience all these different parts of you fully? I think is something that people need to plan out more in their life.
Okay, so here's what I think is this is why I think academia is difficult for you and me.
Okay. Oh.
Also, it might be because I wasn't sure if it's you and me or you and I. So you can tell that I'm just a state school kid who. So and it's this. Let's say 4 years of university. Right? So let's put aside the MBAs for a second. This is 4 years of university, or 5, whatever it might be. Kind of a critical. First of all, crazy expensive, and seen as essential to being successful in life. Yeah. But weirdly, not in the way that it used to be, that it gave you a leg up. But it's just that if you don't have it, forget it. Right. So now, it's gone from a point of differentiation to a point of parity. right?
Ooh,
so a university education is just like, it's the starting point. If you don't have that, you can't even get in the door.
Yeah. And there's so much emphasis on graduate school that like the extreme critical thinking and the true finishing of an intellectual mind
is getting pushed up those degree levels.
Parts. And I mean, college is so complicated in the fact that now we have more people in it. So you also have just like a diversity of preparedness in it that it is bad for everybody at every level.
Yes.
In that, with some exceptions.
So what happens is that universities are very good at teaching concepts. They're very good at teaching theory. They're very good at teaching strategy within these particular domains. But what they don't do a very good job of, and they're getting better at it, but they don't do a very good job of teaching life skills. Okay. So like even just some of the things that we're talking about. I've railed on this idea before. I'm gonna forgo a long conversation about it, but if you think about, well, what is like one of the most important character attributes that we could try to develop is resilience. Okay, so we know that employers want it, and we know the benefit of being a resilient person with regard to our own personal lives, our health and well-being and so on. And yet universities are very good at creating the adversity associated that you need to build resilience, but not very good at developing the skills.
They're good at building the adversity, and then they're good at apologizing for it and creating spaces for you to calm down and relax, but not good at actually building the skill.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So like, so one is like universities could stand to do a better job of turning the volume down on the adversity a bit, because also it's not like, so my example of this is, the average student has 5 classes.
Yeah.
And you have 2 weeks at the end of the semester where everything's due.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a crazy idea if you want people to actually learn.
Yeah. Even crazier on the quarter system.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. And so, and so I think there's a missed opportunity. So we were talking earlier about how these universities do a very poor job of differentiating themselves. Like, I just think that you go, if you wanted to really get serious about this, I'm just offering one random idea, but it's along the idea of this is, we're not going to just teach you how to do calculus and statistics and understand, youbut we're going to actually really help you become a better, better person, a more productive person. You're going to learn the techniques. You're going to learn about good nutrition. You're going to learn about fitness. You're going to learn about mindfulness. You're going to learn about how to do negotiations, like not just sitting across from a table in negotiations, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine a well-being based curriculum. Because if you think about it, why is it that people still buy books? Well, they're either buying for entertainment, right? That 10-to-1 ratio that we talked about earlier, or they're just looking for an edge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so what's happening is the world,
answers they didn't get in college.
Exactly. The world's out there looking for an edge, looing to make their lives better. Mm-hmm. And they've just missed a perfect opportunity during those 4 years to do that.
Yeah. We don't. And I like how so I think that what's kind of cool in sort of like, I'm going to call it well-being 2.0, is at least there's part of this world, and I'd throw you in this, is that it's well-being, but it's tough, right? It's like, it's not, it's not this idea of like well-being is just a comfort and a hug and you're fine and it's good. It's the idea that if I need somebody to have a good life, I have to build strength of character.
Yes.
It's not mind-blowing at all. It's teach to fish rather than give a fish, but I like that is coming in there a little bit. But yeah, I mean, universities have this amazing opportunity and they don't have enough, and they think that they've succeeded oftentimes where they're like, oh, we added a leadership class.
Yes.
And I'm just like, no.
Well, because I mean, you're someone who advises people on how to make experiences. Mm-hmm. And you know that just adding another attribute is often not the way to improve an experience.
Yeah. So like at Disney with the fantasy rides, the rule is one ride, one emotion, right? So don't add more. And if you do, you end up with Little Mermaid and it sucks.
All right. So I'm going to give you one more chance to choose something to talk about.
Okay. So actually, since we're right here, let's talk about Disney, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about how you can make your experiences good. And let's just take the phrase that the amazing Disney Imagineer Tony Baxter taught me at Imagineering. Tony Baxter is the guy who did Star Tours. He did Splash Mountain. He did Indiana Jones. And that is, all great Disney rides thrill, take, and connect. And as he says, great Disney rides do all three of those things. Okay Disney rides do two of those things. And rides that do less than two are now gone.
So tell me this:
thrill, take, and connect.
Okay.
So let's just talk about it with Disney really quickly, and then we can talk about how we can use this anytime we are designing a little day for ourselves.
Okay.
Right. So so let's take Disney's big roller coasters, right? So obviously Space Mountain or Indiana Jones thrills, right? The ride in the darks, they're really cool. But they don't just thrill like a Magic Mountain roller coaster, Six Flags. They do something else. They take you somewhere, right? Okay. And so it takes you into space, and it takes you to Indiana Jones. And connect, the idea is it connects you with a story or concept or, theme that you love. People love Indiana Jones and adventure. People love the concepts of space. Oftentimes Space Mountain is themed for Star Wars or other things to further that connection.
Okay.
Right? And what makes Disney rides more magical than other parks? And why are other parks as magical as Disney sometimes? It's when they thrill, take, and connect. And you can even actually take the fantasy rides at Disney, and most of the fantasy rides have an element of thrill. Peter Pan is actually, it zooms you and it makes you feel like you're flying. Alice is wacky in a way that offers thrill, at least for a kid. Snow White's Scary Adventure has the emotion of scariness. It takes you, each one of those takes you in a space, and they actually slow you, bring you in the space. The first room is always the slow transitional room, most likely the last room, except for some pointed differentiations from this, is a slow transition back. So you're always and it's connecting with the story that you already know and love. So the idea is, if thrill, take, and connect makes a great Disney ride, how can you do that the next time you're going on a date, the next time that you're designing a party, and what are you going to do? And so, for instance, if I throw a party, lots of times I have a theme to the party. And whether it's a nostalgic theme or anything like that, it allows people to connect to something. And I really spend time on making the theme. I make sure that when people are entering my party, I create a zone for where the party is and a slow transitional space into it, replicating the portal. So it feels like they're being taken into a certain space. Backyards can serve as a more space that's different than a living room. There's lots of different options. And thrill, I always try and do something that's a little different or crazy, whether that's a food or, in my case, usually a weird game that I make people do. And my students have taken this and told me lots of crazier things they do. They're all really excited when I teach them about take, right? And they've actually told me how, the next time we're doing a party, we're going to really elongate the idea of the entryway through the stairs. And so it's going to feel like you're being taken. And right there right as you go up, it's going to introduce you to the theme more, so that once you get into the space, you're fully ready to enjoy whatever stupid theme they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is great. And the timing couldn't be better.
Oh.
So I'm going to get some free consulting out of you.
Damn.
I'm going to buy you dinner after this, so it won't be completely free. Cool. So as I meant, this will have already happened after this, before this podcast comes out. But
okay.
So I'm in Los Angeles. I just moved here for my sabbatical. I've been here about almost 6 weeks. And I'm throwing a welcome party for myself. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's on the rooftop of my friend's business on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh.
Okay.
So we got swanky.
Yeah. So it feels very LA. And I've already created the invite for it, which I had made as an image, and then also I've had it printed out that I've been handing it to people. And it's based upon the Quentin Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in LA. And it says, I can't remember exactly what I did with it, but it's like, Peter McGraw, welcome to Los Angeles. And it's in the font.
Yeah.
And it's of the colors of the movie posters and all this kind of stuff. So, and what's very nice about it is if you've seen the movie, from the rooftop, you can see two Hollywood iconic signs that also show up in the movie. So one is the Supply Sergeant neon sign on Hollywood Boulevard, and the other one is Musso and Frank's, which is this steakhouse that's 100 years old. Ooh. And there's scenes in the movie of Musso's and so on. So,
what are we doing?
What are we going to do to thrill, take, and connect for this welcome party?
I mean, I feel like you're a lot of the way there already, right? So you've got a rooftop, right?
Yes.
So that sounds super cool to I bet a lot of people out there, but that is more mundane to Hollywood people, right?
Yes.
Like this is, so I would say is what you want to do is you want to make that space seem like a special space, right? Okay. So Disney has the idea, the reason that Disney feels like this constant adventure is you keep going to spaces that feel differentiated from other spaces, right? Okay. So in addition to, I imagine, so let's say whatever the theme is, have an entryway to the elevator.
It's stairs, but yes.
Stairs. Okay, entryways to the stairs. You could hang things for whatever the theme is and have that slow transition and introduce people to the theme.
Okay.
Also, when they leave, have a sign or something somewhere that they couldn't see before when they walked up. That suggests that they look back. I'm doing this recent research on the idea that meaning is associated with the time for reflection. So if you give them time to reflect on where they've been, they think they've been somewhere more meaningful and stuff. Disney does this on all their rides. Most of the time, the last room you're in, like the last room in Toy Story, is you fighting, not Zorg, you just did that. It's you going back to the real world and there's only one target. So the last room is actually kind of boring, but reinforces the journey and you've done something amazing and important. So portal in, portal out. And then on the top, I'd really lean into what the theme is somehow.
Well, yeah, the theme overall is this idea of welcome to this world.
Yeah.
Welcome to a new world. And first of all, I recognize that it's strange to throw yourself a welcome party.
But it's on brand. It's on brand for people, girl.
Look, I love throwing a good party.
Yeah. Yes. You're exceedingly friendly. You're weirdly self-deprecating, so it's almost like a joke on yourself that you're doing it. Right. Yeah.
And also, no one else is throwing me this welcome to LA party, and I'm excited to be here.
Yep.
So, and people are going to drink my booze and eat my food.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay. So
what else are we going to do?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I hadn't. Well, one is I think I certainly want to use some music from the movie.
Yep. That'll, especially if people hear that right when they're entering, right? And you might not be able to play that music on nonstop up at the top, but you could put that right in the final floor stair, right?
Right.
So that's a place to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then you can have music that may not be that exact theme, but themed on it. Maybe less chain smokers. I don't know what you play.
Well, all the music is from like 1969. And
then that's great.
Movie.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. I love the idea that another thing that, people love to do is they like to have something to do, right?
Yes.
So if there's some sort of activity and using that activity to allow them to contribute and some constrained creativity to the theme, it will also allow them to be stronger connected. So are they recommending, like the basic thing would be they're recommending whether you go get food at certain places. You could have a wall that's a vote for Shake Shack or In-N-Out or something like that. Right. And all these ways in which they're welcoming you and they can put their identity into it, because really the theme is Los Angeles. And so how can you get people to establish their personal connections to Los Angeles publicly?
Oh, that's fun. You know, I think there could be a recommendation board.
Yep.
What should Pete do? Kind of thing.
I also like the idea of doing right. If we're Caleb Warren Cool Research, we do the thing that people normally wouldn't do is a don't ever effing do this board, right? And it will also be really fun because I'll put something up there that people really, really like. And that will start a controversy and it just could be real fun, right?
Yeah, it's I'm a big party thrower and I'm a big theme party thrower. One of the best parties I've ever thrown It started out being called the 6 Degrees of Separation Party, but by the end of the party, it was renamed a Stranger Danger Party.
Okay.
So the idea is very simple. If you're invited to the party, you should come, but you have to bring someone who doesn't know the host. Okay. If that person wants to bring someone, they can, but that person can't know you, and on down the line. And so the first thing about a Stranger Danger Party or 6 Degrees of Separation Party is it's a full party.
Yeah.
Right? Because you double or triple the number of people who usually show up because of the extra people. And then the thing that, unbeknownst to me, and again, keeping with my healthy ego, but also cheekiness, was I put up a big board in my living room and wrote my name in the middle with a circle, and then people built the relationships off of it. Right. So then you would have a line to you. And then if you invited Mary, there'd be a line to Mary. And then we started connecting people, because if you went, then you know Jonathan, and you would connect to Jonathan, and then you know someone else, Dan Ariely, and we all three of us then would be connected. And so I built this like magnificent web of people. And so
that's awesome. That's really fun. Also, since you brought him up, Dan Ariely would love that, because he was always talking about how you want to create norms in certain situations, and that party creates an entirely different norm of a party, right? If people are there with tons of strangers, then the idea is there's no reason you should click out. The cliques can't form at a party.
Indeed,
right?
yes.
That's very good. I want to go to a Pete McGraw Stranger Danger Party.
Yeah, it was a fun time. Off the chain is what the kids say.
So the one thing, if we think of thrill and being cool and breaking the rules, is you're on a roof.
Yes.
Can you throw anything off the roof? Can you seem to break a rule even if you're not breaking a rule?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can shoot shit into the air. So I have another idea for this. And then we're going to wrap, because I realize the only 2 people who give a shit about this are you and me, and then the people who've already been to the party who've listened to this.
Yeah.
So
everybody's excited about their next Stranger Danger Party.
So it's a great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. So it is a group of people who don't know each other, right? So I have different, like I've got kind of the USC, UCLA folks that I know from academia. A bunch of comedy folks are coming. So there are people from the new co-working space. And so there might be something. I like the idea of giving people missions. Okay. So your mission. So when you arrive, you get an envelope, and then there's a mission in the envelope that if you choose to accept it, you need to complete it before you leave the party.
Yeah.
And so if you do a good job with the missions, then it brings people together, right? Like, it's like, if you're an academic, find one of Pete's comedy friends.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
If you're a comedy friend, find one of Pete's academics, and then do something with that person.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever that thing is.
Or you can make them really hard, like, that only one of them has performed at the Knitting Factory or something.
Yeah, that's right. So
you're like,
find the person
who's performed at the Knitting Factory, and they'll be like, okay, the Knitting Factory is like a performance space. That person looks like a right?
Yes.
That'd be great. That'd be so fun.
Yeah. So as a quick aside, we did this, we did like a trashy Jersey night when I was at Princeton. So like we went to a minor league hockey game, and then we went to this like club, outside of Princeton.
Wait, how old are you in this story?
33.
Okay.
Yeah. And we did missions for the group. It was maybe a dozen of us. And it was really fun because I came up with the missions. So we hand out all the missions, and they're handed out randomly. And one of the guys who you might actually know, his name is Jason Reese.
Yeah.
So Jason's in the field. Jason,
he's very nice.
He's a very nice guy. He was doing a postdoc at the same time. He opens up his mission and he just goes, "Oh my God, I am so excited about my mission. I cannot wait to do this mission." And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I must really hit a fucking home run with this mission. The whole night, he's like, "Oh my God, when I'm done, this mission is just the best mission. I'm like the luckiest guy here." I had, me, dumbass that I am, I wrote the mission. It was, your mission is to brag all night long about what a great mission you have. And so I just wanted to build enthusiasm for the mission.
Yeah.
So I just gave away one mission that was just designed for marketing purposes.
That's
and then
awesome.
I forgot that I had done that. And so I was just like racking my brain. I'm like, I wonder which one he has. He has the one where he could brag the whole night.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I might do that as one of my missions. Okay, so we're about out of time.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, Troy, thank you for being the most prepared guest I've ever had.
I don't think it added much structure. But
that's fine. These are meant to be this way. But I do have a final question, and it's actually on the consumption side of things.
Okay.
And that is, what are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really good?
It's really good?
Not just like good, but like you're like, wow, the world needs to know about this. So one or two things.
Okay, so let me do two obvious things that if you haven't done, do it. And then maybe I'll think of something more original. Music, The National. Like, I know that like that's like the band everybody says, but like I remember people like The National. I'm like, I can't listen to The National. That's just the cool indie band. I'm way cooler than listening to the cool indie band. They're so incredible. Okay. Just like this existential, wonderful vibe about them. When I've been writing some songs, just to like approximate what they're like. And so here's the one that's like it. There's a sadness inside me that you'll never know. I could tell you all about it, but I doubt you'd ever feel it whole. We are silly people together, but we feel so alone. At the end of every day, everyone's tragedy's their own. That's my example I do for my students to explain the themes of what the National is before I go in, instead of playing one of the songs. And that, I think, explains all their themes together, which is, I'm an adult, I'm in these relationships, things are good, but not perfect. It's just, if you're above the age of 30, I just turned 32. I'm finally ready for the National. It's amazing.
All right, great.
So the National. And then another example is Jane Austen. I know that I'd never read Jane Austen, and I'm just like, oh, that's such an obvious thing to read. She's an incredible psychologist, like a lay psychologist. Her books are all about social dynamics. And the two books that I would recommend reading from her is her first and last book. Jane Austen fans debate whether it's the first one, but you know, it's Northanger Abbey. And that is where she has a character who actually is kind of annoying. And so the character is making wrong decisions and is really confused about stuff. And it's really interesting to read a book where the author is critical of her main character. Mm-hmm. So that's a little less fun of a book, but it's really interesting, and she has really interesting commentary on it. And then her best book, in my opinion, the last book, is Persuasion, where she has this really strong, mentally strong character, which is named Anne, and it's really cool. The other thing that you will read Jane Austen is you'll be like, this feels a lot like today. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really amazing how certain things around norms, around the aristocracy, around how we think about things, even gender norms, how parents are with their kids, how dads and moms unfortunately have these stereotypes that they lean into sometimes. Like, it's amazing to be like, oh crap, progress is slow.
She's also a brilliant writer. And so just from like appreciating the use of language and the clarity by which she writes.
Yes.
It's very nice.
Unbelievably fantastic.
So a little callback to Cal Newport. So I think in Deep Work, Cal talks about a book. Oh my goodness, it's completely escaping me right now. So it's, I'll just describe it and then I'll put it in the exhibits. This guy did a short series of biographical essays. Excuse me. He did lots of short biographical essays about people. Oh, it's called Daily Rituals by something Mason or Mason someone. Forgive me, Mason. We're Twitter
Look
pals.
In the doobie doop below.
So it's but it's called Daily Rituals. And so what he does is he pieces together these great thinkers, scientists, artists, inventors, etc., their daily rituals. And he pieces them together from their autobiographies, their biographies, their letters, and so on to see what are the beats in their day. Okay. And what Cal does is he does an analysis of a subset of these great minds, and he uses this to support his thesis about deep work, that these people on a daily basis remove distractions from their lives in order for them to immerse themselves as craftspeople into these challenging endeavors, painting, writing, whatever it might be. Jane Austen is one of those people that he does a profile of. And as you might imagine, the book skews heavily male, in part because for historical reasons, the advantages that men had as artists and scientists and so on. What's really fascinating about Jane is she didn't have the luxury that a lot of the men had, which was a wife or caretakers who took care of things and so on. You know, that there was this expectation that Jane, as a daughter and sister and so on, would be involved in the daily household activities and so on. What happened was, if I'm remembering this correctly, is that the other people in Jane's life recognized her brilliance. And so she would sort of be around and be present, but she would be writing. And then at times when there were visitors and so on, she would have to kind of quickly hide her notebook or whatever, so as to sort of appear proper and present in this way, as her sisters and other people like did the other things around the house to allow her the time and space to engage in this kind of deep work. What I invite is, so think about what Jane Austen has done. Imagine had she had the advantages, right, that her contemporaries had in that way. Like thinking about her creating these incredible stories. And I mean, just let's be honest, the female characters in her stories are the most interesting characters, you know, and to be able to build these characters into these things, like it's really quite striking.
She's fantastic. And like every book has a slightly, the female lead is slightly different, right? In Emma, the female lead is like kind of just mean and not a good person, and the male character is less interesting, but is sort of like the rational one that provides that. So she gets so many different types of characters, and such that it's not like you're reading the same book over and over again. It's fantastic. Yeah,
I wish I liked those kind of stories more.
Well, you'll find those same themes somewhere else.
Indeed. Troy, this was super fun.
Awesome. Let's go eat some food.
Let's do it. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guests, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please